Hello. Um, Occupied, Chapter 1. Leon's fingers tangled themselves in the pit of black cables as the TV headlines blared at the back of her head. The news story was a dog who could drink water. As she fidgeted with the leads, the image of the newscaster drifted like an electronic ghost, adding to the extraterrestrial quality of the subtitles. Leon's black clothes and long hair sparred with the glow, and her nose twitched in the flickering. She gave up and got up, showing the knotted cables in her hand. "Give me my tobacco," she said. "We're out," said Padraig. "What?" Padraig was mid-twenties with an unusually large head, especially his ears, which sprung out of a baseball cap over a grey hoodie. He shrugged. Fred crouched beside Padraig on the sofa, a small mess of a lad with disjointed teeth and a weaselly face. "The tobacco I asked you to keep for me?" snapped Leon. "Sponsor's tax," said Fred. Padraig laughed and laughed and laughed. "We're a pair of human filters," said Fred. "You're a pair of oppressing patriarchal melters," yelled Leon. She stormed past him and whipped her coat off the chair, slammed the door behind her. "Yo!" roared Padraig. Owen McBride was watching Amy Goodman presenting the news through Democracy Now! On his computer screen. Monsoons in Thailand killed hundreds and caused millions of dollars in damages. The Chinese and US governments have given aid, with Japan and New Zealand promising to follow. "Jesus," said Owen. Owen, 29 years old, sighed and ran a hand through his brown tufts. He adjusted his glasses and reached across the computer desk for his pouch, papers, and filters. 477 Israeli prisoners in exchange for Defense Forces soldier Gilad Shalit. Another 550 are to be released. He liked that Amy Goodman balanced the bad news with the good. Democracy Now! Rather than Democracy Kapow. It is thought the new Libyan government will declare the official end of the war soon. Owen felt a hand on his shoulder. Josie leaned in, and he felt her black locks warm the back of his neck. They covered his skinny head and dropped down his grey thermal pullover. "Honey, Gary's here." "Oh, already?" He shuffled a half rollie back into the pouch. They hugged. "Don't be bringing the flu home with you. Wrap up." Basque separatist militants announced end of a 43-year campaign of political violence. Owen put on his beanie cap and reached for his coat. "I'll be back for tea. I promise not to fraternise with the pigeons." "It's pissing down," said Josie. "Cats, dogs, hamsters, gerbils." Tunisian Constituent Assembly, the first free election since independence in 1956. Gary Carell didn't enter the hallway. He had a rucksack, taller than him, taller than the door. He had broad shoulders, and his face was a picture of health, square chin and nurturing smile. Running in a by-election as a People Before Profit candidate years before, he was unsuccessful, only so far as reaching the Stormont government. Everybody around there liked Gary Carell. Austerity measures and the rising financial crisis continue with rising unemployment. The doors of St Paul's Cathedral in London remain closed for the first time since World War II. "You ready to go?" said Gary. "You've a filled rucksack," said Owen. "Rucksacks." Owen looked down to another, slanted against the wall. He stepped out and closed the door over. It was spitting rain as Owen and Gary made their way downhill to the city. The overfilled rucksacks wobbled about above their heads. "There's a gazebo on your back. Artisan protest, with a hint of Baden Powell," said Gary. "Hopefully without the young boys. Are you going to—" "I think so," Gary said. "Listen, John can't make it. Would you speak in his place?" "Me?" The police drove by, close to the pavement, scrutinizing the pair. Owen and Gary passed the art college and arrived on Donegal Street. Under the needle of St Anne's Cathedral was a hairdresser's, a sandwich shop, a printer's, and Writer's Square. The square, more like a convex hexagon, was a nexus of streets and alleys, with the police ombudsman on one corner and the electoral office on a corner at William Street. Literary quotes were engraved on some tiles, and a small stone arch at one entry off the empty pavilion. Outside William Street, an old man in a waxed jacket and coal hat approached. "Are you the communists?" he asked. "No," Gary laughed. "I hereby swear I am not," said Owen. "Nor have I ever been at any time, so help me God." "Aye, you'll be laughing on the other side of your face. This here is an illegal protest." The old fellow wandered off, and they carried across the empty pavilion. At the far end was a steep set of 20 steps. A lanky woman in her early 20s sat there with green hair falling out onto a pink jacket. She had too much makeup on, accentuating her otherworldly qualities, and her thin, twitching face shimmered as she spoke. "You're here to do the talk," she said. "Sorry," said Gary. He shook her hand. "Have we met?" "We talked on Facebook. I was at your rally last week about the 1932 strike. I asked if I could photocopy your poster." "Catriona Kennedy," said Gary. "Yeah, Cat." Owen smiled. "Those flyers are all over the place." "Thanks for that," he said, trying his best not to sound sarcastic. Cat helped as they unwrapped the gazebo and fitted poles, slotting it into the ground posts as the winds battered them. Windows Windows opened from the shack housing accommodation block. Residents looked down from the 7 stories of 12 glass panes, built into the flat red brick resembling a hive. Below, there were nearly 200 people on the square's pavilion, its circular style and tall steps giving it a coliseum-like appearance. Among the crowd, Leon watched the speaker, Deirdre, a frizzy blonde-haired woman in her 40s. Deirdre was covered in high-vis. She held a pushbike with her on the steps, the megaphone in her other hand. Owen and Kat stood left, keeping the gazebo from blowing over the knee-high fence into the shrubbery that lined one side of the pavilion. "Sorry, I'm a bit out of breath," Deirdre said, though showing few signs of it. "Dame Street Camp send their regards. People are unhappy about the banks, the IMF, the Irish and European parliaments, but we are in the first stages of a global movement, gathered for equal rights. Let's make that happen." The crowd applauded, and Deirdre rolled her bike down the steps. Gary took up the position. "Thank you, Deirdre. Cycling 100 miles from Dublin to be here. Now, I think we could take another speaker. Give a warm welcome to a good friend from the Socialist Workers, Owen McBride." Owen stepped out of the crowd and got slaps on the back from Gary and Michael. A tubby grey pigeon flapped its wings on the steps beside him and paid close attention. Thank you all for coming. So here we are. Across the world, there's a new optimism in the Arab Spring. Uprisings in Bahrain, Yemen, Egypt, and Syria. Yet we're stuck with the same old liars. Governments and the opposition working not for us, working with bankers and multi-million-dollar companies. I'm sick of it. Sick of choosing sides from the no choices that they give us. Yeah. Though she was far back, Leon could see Owen spitting with the anger. Those old oligarchs, he shouted, their Titanic is sunk. Winter is coming. The King of the North, someone shouted. The fuck? Leon murmured. She looked around, annoyed Padraig was there. People are waking up, said Owen. People affected by the cuts, by the austerity drive. 17 trillion in bailouts, 30 billion to end world hunger. Do the maths. How about we don't wait until another hospital is privatised, another school closed? Let's draw a line. Right on. They need to understand we are not going along with this. We control our own fates. Let's pitch tents here tonight. We have nothing to lose. Let's occupy this spot and show them we control our own fates. Their time is up. Go on, son. Yeah. The crowd was bouncing. Owen stepped down amid applause, screams, and hugs. Jesus, where did that come from? Said Gary. You were going to do it anyway. Gary got back up the steps and waited for them to settle. Well, I can't top that. You heard the man. Bring tents, bring your friends and their tents, bring tea and food, and say we're not moving. They make their stand to the front of the square, starting in a half-secluded grassy nook. On the path, Leon and Kira, raincoated and Kira, sorry, bear with me a moment. They'd make their stand to the front of the square, starting in a half-secluded grassy nook. On the path, Leon and Kira, raincoated and 17 with red curls and all excited, tied the striped gazebo to a shrubbery fence. Beside them was a triangular grass patch against a wall of shacks block of sheltered accommodation. The main patch in front of them was shaped like a trapezium, with room for 16 tents before the pavement. They pitch around two strong trees, an Anto Brennan Spanish Civil War memorial, a bronze sculpture of an international volunteer. Leon read the engraved inscription. Dedicated to the people of Belfast, the island of Ireland, and beyond, who joined the 15th International Brigade to fight fascism in the Spanish Civil War 1936 to 39, and to those men and women from all traditions who supported the Spanish working people and their republic. No pasarán. Path and grass already muddy, Fred joined the poles by their elastic innards. In his hands, he came together to look something like a wicker man, animated by a drunken Ray Harryhausen. Padraig unfurled Gary's bright red tent, and Daniel held one end of it, which flapped against his black bowl cut and dark thermals. Kat and Kira sat on the wall and laughed at their efforts. Aren't you in my art class? Asked Kira. Thought you looked familiar, said Kat. Fuck's sake. Are boys not supposed to be good at putting tents up? That wind, shouted Fred. A devourer of worlds. We're overthrowing capitalism, said Padraig. We are? Fred asked. Gary read aloud the note sewn into the tent bag. Take the pins and join them to form extending structure. Kat took that as her cue to get up and assist. Meanwhile, Leon pushed through the 20 or so activists and reached Padraig and Fred. This is my thing, she shouted. It isn't your thing. Fred burst into laughter. Oh, why the fuck? We've every right to be here, said Padraig. You can help, said Kat. You two are only here to cause trouble. They're no help, yelled Leon. Ugh, sheet's all caked in soil, said Kat. I follow the news, insisted Padraig. You didn't hear them to the saleswoman in Castle Court, complained Leon. Why are the female plugs on your PS2 not shaped like vaginas? See, I told you it'd be like this, said Fred. Come on, kebab shop's 2 doors up. Padraig let go of the sheet. Daniel tried to catch it, and it struck him on the cheek. Kira joined him to pick up the slack. Where's the fly sheet? She asked. What about the poles? Where do they go? Said Leon. You fold the poles inside it so it stands on its own, like a Wendy house, said Kira. I don't recognize your binary gender-coded artifacts, spat Leon. It's supposed to be a dome, said Gary. Aye, designed by Salvador Dali by the looks of it. An hour later, Owen returned by taxi with his guitar, an overnight bag, and a second tent. Padraig and Fred migrated from the kebab shop with a more proactive outlook. Yet they weren't help enough to keep up with Owen's canvas as it soared over the pavilion. It came down at the steps, scrubbing Padraig with wet dirt. Gary stopped it moving with a well-placed foot on the trailing string. One way than the fucking other way, said Padraig. That's climate change for you, said Fred. Owen said to Gary, if Josie asks, tell her I stayed at yours, will you? Huh? Why? No reason. Let's mount it here and take it across. We want these poles through the lining again, said Gary. He rattled the poles as the others climbed over and cleared ropes to the side. Fred unrolled the thick tarpaulin, and Padraig fiddled with the cross beams as the gales moved the half tent around. A dollop of rain spurted off Owen's lenses and dribbled down. Ach, right in my fucking eye, he squealed. Padraig said, same thing happened, Peter Robinson. His iris got wet. What? Okay, this looks like what a tent should look like. Let's see if it pitches like one, said Gary. The rain splashed loudly, pelting the top of the gazebo. Kat, Kira, and Daniel shivered underneath it, with their hands stuffed in their pockets. Kat examined Daniel. He barely said 2 words the whole time. Was that a Spanish accent I heard earlier? Daniel's face said nothing. Pub over the road if you need a piss, she said. Kira said, think the kebab place will do us a tea. The lads came round with the black 2-man unloved ridge tent. They hooked the pegs and buried them in the soil, hammer, slap, slap, and secured with the heel. Then came the guy ropes, one anchored inside the drain gratings, one rope lashed around the taller of the 2 ash trees. As soon as the tent was mounted, the shower and the gales stopped altogether. They brushed and shook out the rain from their hair. When you speak to Josie, say this was your idea, said Owen. Gary laughed and looked out at the 2 tents with pride. It's a global movement. Is Josie not to know you fired the starting pistol here? Your speeches are up on YouTube already, said Kat. Oh, crap. You're kidding. This needs a test run, said Padraig, and he unzipped the black tent. Kat wondered, don't you need a ground sheet in there? With Fred at his back, Padraig dived inside on his belly. Fred followed him, straight into a puddle. Padraig screamed, fuck! And I hope you enjoyed that. And you can get Occupied on Amazon. You can use a short link in the description, is.gd/occupy book. And let me know what you think if you enjoyed that. Preferably by buying. Bye.